An army of 185,000 men marches, confident in victory. No enemy had stopped them. Until they dared to challenge the God of Israel. They didn't know it, but that night would be their last. By morning, all of them were dead. No battle, no resistance. What happened? Who or what caused this massacre? This story will change what you believe about the power of God. When God said enough, 185,000 died without fighting. When Hezekiah took the throne of Judah, no one could have foreseen the radical shift that was about to unfold. Amidst rampant spiritual corruption and unchecked idolatry, the young king made a bold decision. Without hesitation, he personally destroyed the pagan altars, toppling idol poles, shattering columns, and burning abhorrent images before the people. The nation watched in stunned silence, taken aback by the fury and conviction that poured from their king. But Hezekiah did not stop there. He ordered the destruction of the bronze serpent that Moses had made, an object that had been worshipped as a god for centuries. That sacred relic, once revered, was reduced to ashes. For the first time in generations, Judah had a king who truly feared God, and that fear was not his alone. It spread like wildfire. With Hezekiah, the people began to awaken. Judah flourished, crops returned, the economy soared, and the people's trust grew stronger. But something was stirring in the north. A distant roar was growing louder. Assyria, relentless and unstoppable, was conquering nations like a raging storm, leaving ruined cities and mutilated bodies in its wake. Stories of torture, beheadings, and brutal submission echoed through the walls of Jerusalem. Terror was closing in. Then came the siege. The colossal Assyrian army was marching toward the holy city. In desperation, Hezekiah ordered the gold to be removed from the temple doors, attempting to buy peace with the enemy. But he soon realized gold would not be enough. The enemy wanted more. They wanted to destroy. Surrendering to the empire did not stop the war. Instead, it fueled it. The hastily gathered bribe fell into the hands of Sennacherib like dust, meaningless. The king of Assyria, driven by pride and a thirst for domination, rejected the truce. Instead of retreating, he sent his generals with a new mission: to humiliate Jerusalem before its own people. At their head was Rabshakeh, the spokesperson of Assyrian arrogance. He stopped before the walls and, with a loud and assured voice, launched insults like arrows aimed at the heart of Judah. Without fear, he shouted, "Not even your God will save you." His words tore through the air like an invisible sword. The blasphemy reverberated through the streets of the holy city, plunging the people into a silence of pure panic. It was as if the heavens themselves had been defied in front of everyone. Upon hearing this speech, Hezekiah ordered the unthinkable. No one should respond, no words, absolute silence. And so it was. As the enemies mocked, the entire city listened in agony. From the alleys to the squares, ears were tuned in, but mouths were shut. Rabshakeh, sensing the silence, escalated the psychological warfare. He offered safety in exchange for surrender. He promised bread, wine, and rest. Lies all. He mocked Judah's past, ridiculed their history, and spat on the faith of their ancestors. The affront was complete. The people, powerless to respond, let despair seep in like poison. And the silence of the city became a suffocating, mute cry. When the last word of the enemy had faded, Hezekiah, in deep anguish, tore his robes before the Lord. He knew that this moment was not one for diplomacy or military strength. It was time to seek the prophet. It was time to call upon the God who had been publicly challenged. If you like the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the video. The king, with torn robes and troubled eyes, sent messengers to the prophet Isaiah. The tension was suffocating. Outside, the siege was tightening. Inside, hope rested on a response. Isaiah received the message amidst the weight of impending destruction. But the answer from heaven carried no half measures. There was no room for negotiation. God spoke with unyielding authority. He will not touch this city. It was a divine decree, absolute, irrevocable. God didn't merely promise protection. He declared war. I will fight for Jerusalem myself. The city would not be saved by human swords or military strategies. It would be a direct intervention by the Lord of hosts, and the judgment would not stop there. Sennacherib, the king who had dared to challenge the Most High, would be shamed and fall in his own land. Isaiah left no room for doubt. The insult against Jerusalem was, in fact, an insult against God himself. It was the name of the Lord that had been challenged, and the response would come with justice. Upon hearing the prophecy, Hezekiah fell to the ground inside the temple. There, prostrate, he surrendered everything to the Lord. There was nothing more to be done with human hands. Meanwhile, outside the walls, the Assyrian army was growing. Reinforcements were arriving. The siege was tightening. The enemies were preparing for the final assault. Inside the city, the people prayed in silence, their eyes turned to heaven, waiting for the promise to be fulfilled. Then night fell upon Jerusalem. But it was not an ordinary night. It was the night when heaven descended with judgment, and the steps of the unseen began to walk among the enemy encampments. Within the city, the people waited, praying in silence, looking for a sign. But no trumpet sounded. No sword was drawn, no war cry pierced the air. Instead, an angel was sent, silent, deadly, invisible. He passed through the enemy camp like an undetectable shadow, carrying with him the sentence of the Most High. In the heart of the night, when the warriors slept with their spears by their side, sleep became judgment. One by one, the bodies stopped breathing. In a matter of hours, 185,000 men fell without a single sound, no resistance, no chance to defend themselves. By sunrise, the ones still alive emerged from their tents and found the ground covered with corpses. The silence of the city had been met with the silence of death. No soldier reacted because there was no strength left to fight. There was no battle. There was only execution. Among the survivors, panic spread like dry fire. No man wanted to stay. What had once been arrogance had turned into pure terror. And then Sennacherib saw it. His plans, his power, his pride, all shattered by a force he could never understand. The God of Judah had not needed spears or cavalry. He had not needed high walls or treaties. Only one command, one angel, and everything changed. Jerusalem was saved without raising a sword, because when God decides to fight, even the greatest of armies becomes powerless. The massacre of the Assyrian army sent shockwaves through the heart of the known world. No war had ever been won like this. While Jerusalem breathed a sigh of relief and reverence, Sennacherib returned to Nineveh in silence. There was no glory, only humiliation. His face bore not the look of a conqueror, but the weight of one who had been defeated without ever seeing the enemy. His gods, in whom he had trusted, had done nothing to save him from the public disgrace. They were as useless as his promises of destruction. The Assyrian throne, once a symbol of terror, became a cold place, surrounded by paranoia. The king, once feared, now lived under suspicion, isolated, insecure, but the final blow would come from the least expected place. His own sons, fueled by resentment and a thirst for power, conspired in the shadows, and they chose the most symbolic moment to strike. While Sennacherib bowed before the idol in the temple, seeking solace in the false, his two sons entered with determined steps. Without hesitation, they plunged the blade into him right there. There was no battalion, no trial, no defense. It was an execution marked by the invisible hand of divine justice. The man who had challenged the Most High fell to his knees exactly as he should have. The metallic sound of his body crashing to the floor before his useless god echoed louder than any war trumpet. The empire that had spread terror now bled from within, drowning in instability. Meanwhile, Judah celebrated. Justice had been done. Not by the hands of men, but by the uncontestable sovereignty of God. The fall of Sennacherib was not just a political collapse, it was a living proof that no one dares to challenge the Lord and remain standing. The death of Sennacherib sealed a chapter of terror that ended without Jerusalem needing to lift a single sword. Soon, news began to spread like wildfire. The city survived, the enemy army was destroyed, and no strike was made by the men of Judah. The neighboring nations, accustomed to fearing Assyria's power, were stunned. In palaces and camps, priests, kings, and generals gathered to understand the impossible. How had a people, surrounded and without significant military strength, defeated the most brutal war machine in the world? The answer was baffling. The faith of one man had brought down an empire. It wasn't shields or walls, it was Hezekiah's unshakable trust in the God of his ancestors. The king, although exalted by the people, refused any praise. In the face of such a great miracle, he remained face down, giving all honor to the Lord. The temple, once neglected and desecrated, now gleamed with reverence. Men and women gathered to worship in awe. The place was holy once more, and the reports of the miracle didn't stay within Jerusalem. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, and reached distant kingdoms. The feat became a living legend. Ancient prophecies, once forgotten, now pulsed with significance for that generation. Everything had come to pass. God had shown the world that his word was sharper than any sword, more powerful than any army. And through it all, while empires crumbled and the world tried to comprehend what had happened, one city remained standing. Not by force, not by chance, but because God himself had decided to defend it. Jerusalem was alive, Jerusalem's victory was indisputable, but it was not without its scars. Though the walls had never been touched by an enemy, those within them had felt the impact. The siege, the fear, the psychological pressure, everything had left deep marks. Families wept not for the dead, but for the suffocating days of silence and waiting. Women who barely slept, men who feared for their children's future. The trauma was real. Children grew up hearing the story of the miracle, not as a legend, but as a fact that shaped their faith. They learned early on that God could stop entire armies without needing a human army, and that the silence of that night, when the city awaited its end, became an eternal symbol. The Psalms began to carry the weight of that siege. Prayers, even years later, echoed the same cry, the same hope. Faith became the only weapon valued by Judah. The people learned that human alliances, no matter how powerful they seemed, would never offer the security that comes from total submission to God. The trauma still lived in every watchful eye, every cautious gesture. But it was a trauma that mixed with gratitude and reverence. The marks of that war were not on the walls, but in the souls, invisible yet eternal. The story was carefully recorded. Prophets and scribes understood that this could not be forgotten. It was more than a victory. It was a turning point in history, and the day when God said, "Enough," became immortal, written in scrolls, memories, and faith. A permanent reminder that when God intervenes, even the mightiest empires cannot stand. Jerusalem lived to tell the tale, and the world would never doubt the power of the one who reigns above all kings. The reign of Hezekiah transcended time and became a symbol of spiritual courage. He didn't lead merely with strategy, he led with unwavering faith. His loyalty to God was the key that opened the heavens. When all seemed destined for destruction, it was his trust in God that changed the course of history. The Lord had not promised the absence of war, but his presence in the midst of it. and he fulfilled that promise with absolute precision. The nations that watched from afar understood the lesson. Mocking God comes at a great cost. What happened in Jerusalem was not just deliverance, it was judgment. Prophets who witnessed those days saw more than a miracle. They saw a foreshadowing of the last days when God's hand would once again move to judge the nations. When God decides to intervene, he rewrites human destiny. No king, empire, or ideology can thwart his will. No power on earth can stop him. When he acts, the impossible is no longer theory. It becomes history, testimony, and legacy. The victory of Jerusalem should not merely be seen as a reminder of the past, but as an eternal warning. For the one who defended Judah is still alive, ever watchful and sovereign. And when God says, "Enough," there is no argument, no resistance, no escape. The whole earth falls silent, the heavens declare their will, and his glory is acknowledged even by those who once defied him. Jerusalem was spared not by merit, but by grace, and the world was never the same after God decided to show who truly reigns. If you enjoyed this content and want to continue exploring hidden mysteries and stories from the Bible, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps us bring more videos like this and reach more people interested in the Bible. Be sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss future content, and share this video with friends who might enjoy it. See you next time.